Her first payment was in 1998. Her latest? Last month. Her next? She doesn't even know anymore. Her name is Janet Wallace. She's 52 years old. And she's still paying off her student loans from college in the 1990s. She's a middle school teacher in Pennsylvania. She makes $48,000 a year. She's taught for over 2 decades. She's never missed a payment, never defaulted, never ignored the calls, never ran from her debt, but her balance today is higher than when she graduated. She borrowed $41,000 to get a degree in education. She's already paid over $60,000, and she still owes $75,800. Let that sink in. She was told, "Go to college, take the loan. It's an investment. You'll pay it off in no time. This is the path to success." But the only thing she's paid for is a system that never wanted her to finish. Janet lives in a small rented apartment. She drives a 2007 Toyota Corolla. She's never taken an overseas trip. She skipped having children. She has 2 side gigs, tutoring and grading state tests online. Why? Because her debt has never let her breathe. She tried for forgiveness. The government promised, "Make payments for 10 years, and we'll cancel the rest." So she did. 10 years, 120 payments on time, every month. Then she applied. She was denied. They said her payments didn't qualify. Wrong servicer, wrong type of plan, wrong form filed in year 6. Try again in another 10 years. She laughed, then cried, then made another payment. This isn't rare. This isn't an exception. This is how the system works. In America today, 45 million people owe student loans. Total debt, $1.7 trillion. Average repayment time, 21 years. Default rate, 1 in 5. Loan forgiveness approved for fewer than 2% of applicants. And here's the catch. You can declare bankruptcy on credit cards. You can walk away from a mortgage, but not student debt. It follows you through jobs, through relationships, through illness, through retirement. You can die, and your family might still owe. Janet once said, "It's like I bought a house I'll never live in. I just keep paying the mortgage." Except this house isn't real. It's a promise that was never meant to be kept. She doesn't hate learning. She loves her job. She loves seeing kids grow and believe they have a future, but she can't tell them the truth. Do your best. Get good grades. Take the loan. Go to college. Because if they ask, "Did it work for you?" she has no answer. Just a payment stub. The truth is brutal. For millions, student loans aren't an investment. They're a life sentence. Not because people don't pay, but because the system makes sure they never stop paying. It's not just the interest. It's the fees, the compound growth, the predatory structures, the shifting rules, the forbearance traps, the services with no accountability, the false promise of forgiveness. Welcome to System Fails. This is the story of how education became debt, how ambition became punishment, and how Janet, and millions like her, were sold the American dream at 7.5% interest. Janet was 17 when she signed the papers. Her mother stood beside her in the school counselor's office. Neither of them fully understood what they were agreeing to. What they understood was this: college is your only shot. Her mom worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic. Her dad had left when she was 9. Money was always tight, but hope was never missing. Janet was smart. She loved books. She was the kid who stayed after class to help others understand algebra. Teachers told her she had a gift. She believed them. She applied to Westminster College, a small liberal arts school in Pennsylvania. Tuition, $16,000 per year. Room and board, another $8,000. Books, transportation, fees, add $3,000 more. That was 1991. But even then, the numbers felt impossible. Her mom made $24,000 a year. There were no savings, no help from family, no safety net, so they turned to what everyone said was normal. Student loans. The financial aid office made it sound easy. Just sign here. It's all covered. You'll pay it off once you graduate. Everyone does. Janet nodded. Her mom asked one question. Will she be okay? The advisor smiled. She'll be more than okay. She'll be successful. Janet was the first in her family to go to college. The pride was real. So was the pressure. She majored in education. She wanted to be a teacher. Not because it paid well, but because it mattered. She tutored classmates, volunteered at local schools, graduated with honors, and with $41,000 in debt. At 22, she landed her first teaching job, $28,000 a year. She was ecstatic. Finally, she could start building a life. But the loan payments came fast, $420 a month. She deferred for a year. Too overwhelmed. The interest accrued. Then she entered INSME-based repayment. Smaller monthly payments, but the loan grew. Each year she paid. Each year the balance climbed. She thought about going back to school. A master's degree meant a better salary, but it also meant more debt. She held off. She started tutoring on weekends, then grading for the state, then summer school, 3 jobs, 1 loan, 0 progress. Years passed. Friends married, bought homes, had children. Janet moved apartments, never staying long enough to feel at home. The loan stayed with her. Every tax refund, garnished. Every raise, absorbed. Every attempt at normalcy, rerouted through the debt. She started to ask questions. Why is my balance bigger now than when I started? I've paid for 10 years. Where's the forgiveness? Who's profiting from this? She called her servicer. Navient. Waited 58 minutes. Got transferred 3 times. Received vague answers. Once, an agent told her, "It looks like your payments didn't qualify for forgiveness. You were in the wrong repayment plan." "But I've been paying non-stop." "Yes, but not under the right category." She asked, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" They hung up. Janet wasn't irresponsible. She never missed a payment, never bought luxury, never gambled, never splurged. She just wanted to teach, and that dream cost her everything. By the time she turned 40, the balance had reached $65,000. She laughed bitterly the first time she realized, "I've now paid more than I borrowed, and I still owe more than I ever had." Her mom passed in 2012. She never saw Janet finish paying. Janet brought the loan paperwork to the funeral. She didn't know why. Maybe to show someone that it still existed, that it hadn't gone away. Maybe to say, "This followed me here too." She tried again for forgiveness in 2020, filed every form, attached every payment record, wrote a letter, waited 5 months, denied. Your payments were made to a private loan servicer, not eligible under PSLF. But her loan was federal. It was outsourced. She asked, "How was I supposed to know that?" Silence. Janet began counting time in statements. Each envelope marked a month she didn't move forward. Each payment was a tribute to a promise long dead. She tells her students to dream big. She doesn't tell them about her loan. She doesn't tell them that she cried in the teacher's lounge when she saw her balance cross $70,000. Again. She once told a friend, "I feel like I'm renting my education, and the landlord keeps raising the rent." Imagine a loan that grows when you pay it. A contract you can't escape, even in bankruptcy. A debt passed from parent to child across generations, a bill that punishes you for believing in yourself. Welcome to the American student loan system. It wasn't built to help you graduate. It was built to follow you. Compound interest, the debt that multiplies. Janet borrowed $41,000. She expected to pay back $41,000, maybe a little more. But what she didn't understand at 17, what no one explained clearly, was how compound interest works. Each time she deferred payment, interest was added. And then interest was added on that interest. Profitable core. On paper, legal. In practice, brutal. After 4 years of deferment while teaching full-time on a low salary, her debt had ballooned to $55,000 before she'd paid a single dime. And it kept growing. Forbearance. The trap that looks like help loan services often offer forbearance, the right to pause payments when you're in trouble. Janet used it twice. Once during a medical emergency. Once while unemployed for 2 months. Both times she was told, "No penalties, we'll pause your bill." What she wasn't told, interest would continue accumulating every day, and that interest would be capitalized, added to the principal. Meaning she wasn't pausing anything, she was feeding the beast. Forbearance isn't a break, it's a debt steroid. Payment plans, designed to confuse. There are more than 10 federal repayment plans. Some are income-based, some are standard, some are graduated, some require annual recertification. Miss a form. Get kicked off, choose the wrong one. You reset the forgiveness clock. Janet was enrolled in an IBR plan, but her servicer, Navient, didn't tell her that it wouldn't count toward public service loan forgiveness. She paid 7 years before realizing none of it would count. They called it a technicality. She called it a robbery. Loan services, profiting from confusion. Navient, Nelnet, Fed Loan, Great Lakes. These companies manage trillions in student loans, but they're not government agencies. They're private corporations, contracted to collect, and they profit most when borrowers stay in debt longest. Incentive misalignment at its finest. They don't lose money when you fail. They make more. They send confusing letters. They delay communication. They offer help that leads to higher interest. They deny forgiveness based on incorrect form versions. It's not chaos. It's by design. Forgiveness programs, promises rarely kept. You may have heard of PASLF, public service. Loan forgiveness, it sounds noble. Work 10 years in public service. Make 120 payments. Get the rest forgiven. But from 2007 to 2021, 98% of applicants were denied. Why? Wrong plan, wrong type of loan, miscounted payments, technical glitches, late recertifications. Janet was one of them. She had proof of 120 payments, still denied. They told her to start over. Other programs like teacher loan forgiveness offer up to $5,000, but only for certain subjects. Only at certain schools, only if your school qualifies under federal metrics. And only if you don't use PSLF. No stacking allowed. Janet taught English. Her school didn't qualify, her timing didn't match the rules, so the answer was, no help, try again. Bankruptcy, not allowed. Student loans are one of the only debts in America that cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. Credit card debt, gone. Medical bills, gone. Mortgage, car loan, gone. Student debt, you'll pay, or we'll garnish your wages, your tax refund, your Social Security check when you retire. Janet once asked a lawyer, "Can I at least negotiate the interest down?" He said, "They don't negotiate, they outlive you." Ballooning debt. Even when you pay. Janet kept paying $300 a month, then $400, sometimes $500 when tutoring picked up. After 15 years, she checked her balance. It had increased. She broke down. All those years, all that work, and the number on the screen was bigger than ever. Her servicer sent a cheerful email. "Thank you for your continued dedication." She didn't reply. The real cost, not just financial. It's not just the money. It's the mental weight, the career sacrifices, the relationships delayed, the dreams shelved, the years gone. Janet never bought a home. Afraid of the debt-to-income ratio. Never had children. Afraid of passing on poverty. Never took a sabbatical. couldn't risk missing a payment. This is not an accident. This is a system engineered to stretch your loan across your life. So banks collect interest forever. So servicers get bonuses. So the illusion of personal responsibility remains intact, even as people drown. Student debt isn't a payment plan. It's a control mechanism, and millions are trapped inside it, paying endlessly with no exit. Janet is just one face, but behind her stand millions, 45 million borrowers, $1.7 trillion in debt, and an entire generation caught in the teeth of a promise they were told to chase, but never meant to catch. Her students, the ones she teaches today, they're already planning their own loans. Some of them are 18. Some already know their parents are still paying off their own loans. They joke about it. I'll die with Sally Mae. At least I won't be lonely. Me and my debt can get married. It's dark humor, but it's not a joke. A generation on pause. Millennials, the first generation to graduate into massive student debt, are now in their 30s and 40s. But many still rent instead of buy, delay marriage, postpone children, skip investing, work multiple jobs, live paycheck to paycheck. Why? Because of the shadow of student loans. A study by the Federal Reserve showed home ownership rates for millennials are 8–10% lower than previous generations, due largely to student debt. 1 in 3 borrowers over 35 have never made a dent in their principal, only paid interest. Some Social Security checks are now being garnished to repay decades-old student loans. Yes, the system is so sticky, it follows people into retirement. The math of fear. Student loan debt isn't just about what you owe, it's about what you fear to do. Janet once considered starting a small tutoring business, but she worried. If my income increases, my payments go up. What if I miss one? What if I default? That's the psychological damage. Debt makes you play small. Debt makes you stay quiet. Debt teaches you to not risk anything. Multi-generational fallout. Some parents took out Parent Plus loans to help their kids go to college. Now, they're in their 60s, still working, still paying. Meanwhile, their kids are also in debt. 1 family, 2 generations, 4 loans, the American dream, financed with compound despair. Race and class divide. Student debt doesn't hit everyone equally. Black borrowers, especially black women, are disproportionately crushed. They borrow more on average, they have lower post-grad incomes, and are more likely to work in public service jobs that promise forgiveness but rarely deliver. Janet has a colleague named Tanya, a single black mother of 2. She borrowed $35,000. 20 years later, she owes $112,000. Her reaction? I've stopped checking. I just pay what they ask. Debt becomes not just a financial weight, but an emotional numbness. The college lie. College was sold as a ladder, but in America, it's become a casino. The house always wins. Universities keep raising tuition, even as their endowments grow. Loan companies keep expanding, even after lawsuits, fines, scandals. Politicians keep promising reform, even as forgiveness programs deny 98% of applicants. And borrowers, they keep paying, even when it costs them everything. The dropouts who still pay. Here's the cruelest twist. 40% of borrowers never graduated. They left college without a degree, but with a mountain of debt. So they get no credential, no job bump, no access, just bills. Janet calls them the forgotten class. Punished for trying and punished again for not finishing. Mental health toll. It's not just economics. The mental health cost of student debt is enormous. Anxiety over missed payments. Depression tied to lifelong financial strain. Delay in milestones causes deep insecurity. Suicidal ideation from hopeless repayment timelines. A recent study found Borrowers with high student debt are 2.5x more likely to experience severe depression. Janet knows this firsthand. Two of her former students dropped out of college, not because of grades, but because of money. One wrote to her, "Ms. Wallace, I feel like I failed before I even started." A rigged structure. This isn't about lazy kids, or bad decisions, or people living beyond their means. This is about a system engineered to extract, not empower. It tells you, invest in yourself. But when you do, it treats you like a commodity. You become a revenue stream, an interest calculation, a file in a server that grows more valuable the longer it stays open. Janet once said, "They didn't sell me a degree. They sold me a future and a charged interest on every step." Now she sees it everywhere. In her students' eyes, in her co-workers' panic, in her own reflection. This is not one woman's burden. This is a generation's quiet war, and it's happening in broad daylight. Janet never considered herself an activist. She was a teacher, a rule follower, a quiet fighter. But in 2019, she cracked. After another denied forgiveness application, she joined a Facebook group called "I'm Still Paying," 20 years later. It had over 85,000 members, and every story sounded like hers. Some had paid double, some had been misled, some owed 6 figures despite 15 years of payments. It wasn't a glitch. It was a pattern. That same year, something shifted. People began fighting back, not just quietly, not just with spreadsheets, but with lawsuits. The lawsuits begin, suing the servicers. Navient, one of the largest student loan servicers in the U.S., was sued by multiple states. New York, Illinois, Washington, California. What did they allege? Misleading borrowers, pushing them into forbearance, which earns more interest, failing to inform them of better repayment options, and deliberately sabotaging applications for forgiveness. In one deposition, a Navient employee admitted, "We were trained to get them off the phone, not to help them." Navient eventually agreed to a $185 billion settlement, but no executives were charged. No operations were stopped, no systems changed. They paid the fine, kept collecting, for borrowers like Janet. "Here's a check for $260. Thank you for your decades of suffering." PSLF. Nightmare. The forgiveness that wasn't the Public Service Loan Forgiveness, PSLF, program, created in 2007, was meant to reward public workers. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, social workers make a 120 payments, work 10 years in public service, get the rest forgiven. Sounds simple, but by 2021, out of over 2 million applicants, only 1.3% received forgiveness. The rest were denied due to technicalities. Wrong loan type, wrong repayment plan, wrong servicer, missed recertification by 1 day. The rules shifted. The clock reset. It was a game with no finish line. Janet applied. Twice. Denied. Twice. A movement is born. Cancel student. Debt. Frustration became fuel, and online, that fire became a hashtag. #cancel student debt. What began as a whisper became a demand. No more tweaks, no more relief programs that fail. Total cancellation. Critics called it unrealistic, entitled, unfair to those who already paid. But for the borrowers, this wasn't charity. It was justice. Enter the politicians. In 2020, the student debt crisis became a political issue. Candidates campaigned on bold promises. Elizabeth Warren, cancel up to $50,000 per borrower. Bernie Sanders, cancel all student debt. Joe Biden, promise partial forgiveness and PSLF reform. Young voters rallied. Hope surged. Janet, skeptical but desperate, voted with trembling belief. Biden's forgiveness plan and the Supreme Court. In 2022, President Biden announced a sweeping move. Cancel $10,000 in federal student debt per borrower, $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. Cap repayment to 5% of income reform, PSLF permanently. It was historic. It could wipe out debt for over 20 million people. People cheered. Applications opened. Janet applied immediately. Then came the lawsuit. 6 Republican-led states sued the Biden administration, claimed it was an overreach of executive power. In June 2023, the Supreme Court struck it down. The forgiveness was dead. Janet received an email. Your application is no longer being processed. No apology, no explanation, just silence. The political theater. The debt crisis became a stage. Politicians argued forgiveness rewards irresponsibility. What about personal accountability? But they ignored the predatory system, the servicer abuse, the fact that interest grows faster than repayment. One congressman who voted against forgiveness had $130,000 of PPP loans forgiven for his business. Another called forgiveness a handout after getting his Ivy League degree tuition-free through legacy admission. Janet watched the debates on TV. She turned it off after 5 minutes. They're not talking to us. They're talking about us. To each other. The rise of debt collectives. Frustrated borrowers began organizing outside the system. Groups like the Debt Collective, Student Borrower Protection Center, Freedom to Prosper. These weren't just support groups, they were activist hubs. They filed lawsuits, held rallies, published reports, trained people to navigate the bureaucracy and expose it. One of their slogans, "You are not alone." Janet joined a virtual town hall. For the first time, she spoke publicly. She said, "I don't want a bailout. I want my life back. I did everything right, and I'm still being punished." There were tears, applause, then silence. Then another woman spoke, then a man, then a veteran, then a nurse, then a janitor. This wasn't pity, this was resistance. Why the fight still matters. Janet hasn't given up. She still teaches, still pays, still writes letters, but she no longer blames herself. She knows now. It was never me. It was the system. She tells her students, ask questions. Read the fine print, but most importantly, fight for a system that doesn't destroy you for trying. Because education should not be a trap, forgiveness should not be a fantasy, and debt should not be a life sentence. How do we define fairness? Is it working hard and earning your keep, or is it watching interest pile up on a loan you took out at 18, still haunting you at 52? Is it taking personal responsibility, or is it being responsible for a system that refuses to be accountable? At what point does repayment become punishment? Let's break it down. Janet took out $41,000. She has paid over $63,000. She still owes $75,000. How? Because the system isn't designed to end. It's a treadmill with no stop button. It says, keep going. And if you fall, that's your fault. But ask yourself, would you accept a mortgage where every payment made your balance go up? Would you accept a hospital bill where every time you tried to pay, they added a new fee? Then why do we accept this with student loans? It's not just about paying for school. You're not just paying for tuition. You're paying for bureaucratic complexity, for loan services that mislead, for predatory interest formulas, for denial letters after 10 years of hope, for private companies profiting off public dreams. You're paying to stay trapped. Who built this? The U.S. federal government holds most student debt, but it contracts collection to private services who are financially incentivized to keep people paying forever. No other debt works like this. Credit cards can be discharged in bankruptcy. Medical debt can be negotiated. Mortgages have clear terms. Car loans have defined limits. Student debt is infinite by design. Global comparison, how other countries do it. Germany. Public universities are tuition-free. Government sees education as a public good, not a product. Sweden offers income-based repayment capped at 4% of income. Loans forgiven after 25 years, even if not fully paid. Australia. Income-based repayment begins only after a minimum salary is reached. If your income drops, payments stop automatically. No penalty. United States. Borrow at 7%. Interest capitalizes annually. Forgiveness denied for paperwork errors. No bankruptcy allowed. Wage garnishment if you fall behind. Now, ask, is this a system of education or a machine of extraction? Moral contradictions. We tell 17-year-olds, be mature enough to sign a 6-figure loan. But don't let them rent a car, drink a beer, vote in some states. We criminalize parents who let children skip school, but punish those same children when they do go to school. With lifelong debt. We say college is a ticket to the middle class, but in reality, it's a trap door with interest. What gets forgiven in America? Corporations write off billions in tax breaks. PPP loans during COVID were forgiven instantly. Banks got bailouts after the 2008 crash. Billionaires dodge taxes legally every year, but a school teacher who borrowed to teach kids algebra. Sorry, your form had a typo. No forgiveness. What is education for? In theory, to empower, to uplift, to open doors, to create informed citizens. But in this system, education becomes a financial asset, a lifetime contract, a mechanism of social control. You study to rise, but you stay down, paying to belong in a world you were told was yours. When the system teaches you to stop dreaming, Janet used to tell her students, college is the key. Now she tells them, ask what the door is made of. Because she knows, behind many doors, labeled opportunity is a trap painted gold. She's not cynical. She's awake. And now, so are millions of others. The final questions. If a system keeps failing people who follow the rules, is it broken, or is it working exactly as intended? If the people meant to benefit, teachers, nurses, students, are crushed under its weight, who exactly is it designed for? Because a debt that never ends isn't a mistake. It's a business model. Because a promise that changes every time you get close isn't a policy. It's a trap. Because an education that bankrupts you isn't enlightenment. It's economic warfare. Janet doesn't want your pity. She wants your eyes open. She doesn't need rescue. She needs you to ask better questions. Because one day it won't be Janet. It'll be your child, your niece, your neighbor, or you. Standing with a diploma in one hand and a bill that never stops growing in the other. Janet is still teaching. She still wakes up at 6 o'clock a.m., still packs her lunch, still grades essays by hand, and every month she still makes a payment on a loan from 1998. She doesn't take vacations. She doesn't go shopping. She doesn't dream much anymore. But she still shows up, every day, for her students, for the system that forgot her, for a country that asked her to invest and gave her debt in return. There are millions like her. Quiet, diligent, trapped. They're not asking for charity. They're asking for justice, not because they're irresponsible, but because they were lied to. They were told education is freedom. But they found a collar with an interest rate. This isn't just about student loans. It's about a promise broken, a system exposed, a dream corrupted. And the cost isn't just financial, it's moral. Because what does it say about a society that punishes its teachers but forgives its billionaires? What does it say when we treat ambition like a liability? What does it say when we teach kids to dream, then hand them chains at graduation? It says, we sold you the future, but we're keeping the profits. So now we ask, what would it look like to make education a right? not a gamble? What would it look like if forgiveness were automatic, not impossible? What would it mean if we stopped punishing people for trying to rise? If this story made you angry, good. If it made you sad, better. But if it made you think, then you're exactly who we made this for. Share this story. Talk about it. Question everything you were taught about debt and deserving. And most of all, never again believe that silence means consent. Because education should never cost someone their life, and debt should never be a sentence without parole. This is Powerline Stories, narrated by the voices they tried to silence.